have an intruder!
How did he get in? In through the window?
Sup internet, Raggedy Adams here. It's been a while since I've done anything with the blog, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to do the Doctor Who tag as created by Luke Spillane and as tagged by Michael Markman, aka Mickeleh. Some of you will know this from like watching the vlogs or whatever, that I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I mean, I don't know whether there's anything in the background or any kind of little details that, you know, might have given it away. And even though Mickeleh didn't specifically tag me at the end of the video, he did say that anyone who has commented on previous Doctor Who reviews that he's done was welcome to put something up. So let's move on. Number 1, who is your favourite Doctor? Now, as the scarf and the hat will probably attest, I'm pretty much a big Tom Baker fan when it comes to classic Doctor Who. I love the costume, I love his persona, I love him as an actor I just really enjoy. And I feel like when it got to his era of the show, they really kind of crystallized the idea that each Doctor is the same person but with a slightly different personality. He was the first one to really sort of incorporate elements of the previous ones while still being unique in and of himself. And also he had some of the best written episodes and some of the best writers and guest stars sort of before it became like the big crossover success that it has been with the revamped version. In terms of like the revamped version of Doctor Who though, I'm gonna go with a really kind of lazy and obvious choice, and I'm gonna go with David Tennant. Because again, it felt like by the time they got round to Tennant, they really had kind of formulated what they wanted Doctor Who to be. He was sort of the everyman Doctor, but he also had a little bit of a darker, a more serious kind of side to him. And he kind of opened it up to a wider audience. So, you know, in that sense, you've got to give credit where it's due. I will qualify that by saying that I am also very fond of what Peter Capaldi is currently doing with Doctor Who, and he's kind of brought it closer in style to sort of William Hartnell and to a certain degree John Pertwee, where the Doctor is more serious, a bit more sort of scowly, but without losing that sense of fun and whimsy that is important to like making the character relatable. Number 2. What is your favourite Doctor Who story? The show has been going for more than 50 years, so at this point it's really hard to sort of nail down a particular story that completely encapsulates the series as a whole. However, I have narrowed it down to a top 5, and so these are my current favourite Doctor Who stories. Number 5, The Day of the Doctor. Number 4 is The Doctor's Wife. Number 3, The Talons of Weng-Chiang. Number 2, City of Death. And finally, my favourite Doctor Who story is one of the ones that technically was never released. And that one is Shada. Now Shada, like City of Death before it, was written by Douglas Adams. And it was going to be a season finale. But parts of it were unable to be shot because of a technician strike, and whilst they were originally planning to go back and reshoot stuff after the strike was over, they ran over budget and they ran over time, so they ended up making, I believe it was The Horns of Nimon instead. It was eventually released on video and later DVD with a wraparound narration sequence which is narrated by Tom Baker. But there is also a version of it that was done as a audio play by Big Finish and later as a webcast that had 8th Doctor Paul McGann in it, in Tom Baker's role, as well as bringing back companion Romana, as well as Andrew Sachs as the villain, and James Fox as Professor Chronotis. Number 3. Who is your favourite companion? My favourite companion from the classic series was Romana, specifically Lalla Ward's version of Romana, who was technically the second incarnation, who first appeared in Destiny of the Daleks by Terry Nation, and would later go on to be in many great episodes such as City of Death, the aforementioned Shada, and also State of Decay. My favourite companion from the new series is unquestionably Catherine Tate's Donna Noble. The Doctor and Donna are very quick to make a point of the fact that they don't wish to be companions in the biblical sense. They just want to be friends. And their friendship and the way they play off each other is very much in the style of the way Tom Baker's Doctor and Lalla Ward's Romana kind of work together. In that it's one of the few cases where the Doctor and his companion are on equal footing. Because there is no sort of romantic entanglement or no apparent massive age gap, you get the feeling that the two characters are comfortable just going on adventures with each other and having fun. And there's no sort of underlying creepiness to their relationship dynamic. She's also one of the few companions who has really just laid into the Doctor and really kind of pulled him on some of his more troubling choices. Donna knows that he needs someone around to keep him from vanishing off the deep end. And that is why Donna is so beloved by so many people. In my opinion, at least. Number 4. What was the first Doctor Who story you ever watched? In terms of the classic series, the first one I ever saw, I only saw clips of, but it was also one of the first ones I went back and revisited, was Genesis of the Daleks. One of the things that Terry Nation kind of weaved into a lot of the Dalek storylines that he wrote and was responsible for co-creating was the Daleks as the Nazis, as this unstoppable force that worships purity and death above all else. And so when they got to Genesis of the Daleks and they had the opportunity to show the creation of them on Skaro, he raised the interesting question which pops up a couple of times. If you had the power to prevent the rise of Hitler or any kind of destructive regime, would you take the opportunity to do it and damn the consequences? Or would you have the dilemma of what would a world or even a universe without Hitler, without the Nazis, without the Daleks be like? When the new series came around, I didn't immediately get on the bandwagon with it because at the time I was working and I didn't get a lot of free time. But the first episode of the relaunched Doctor Who that I saw was the second episode of the Chris Eccleston run, The End of the World. And that still counts as one of my favourites of his era. Because having missed out on Rose and kind of getting to know the backstory through that, it was the first time we really got to see the Doctor take someone off into the world and do all kinds of crazy shenanigans. What is your favourite series or era? Pretty much my favourite era, at least in terms of the classic series, is Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor era. Particularly during Romana's tenure, as well as some of the stuff from his first season. In terms of the revamped Doctor Who, I've got to go with Series 4 because, again, Donna Noble, Catherine Tate, what else is there to say? Number 6, what is your favourite pre- or post-regeneration story? Even though this counts as technically 2, they're back-to-back, so the one dovetails into the other. My favourite pre-regeneration story is The End of Time, because while The Parting of the Ways kind of dealt with regeneration as a bit of an afterthought, this was a storyline where the Doctor was actively trying to avoid his impending death. It was prophesized, he knew about it, and he doesn't want to go. And it's very much that whole classic Dylan Thomas thing of raging against the dying of the light. It also contains one of my favourite villains, so we'll get to that in a moment. Post-regeneration, I have to go with The 11th Hour, because whilst, you know, we were all sad to see David Tennant go, the way they set up Matt Smith as the newer, younger, more sort of impish Doctor just ticked all the boxes for me. I loved his relationship with Amy and how it was set up. I loved the villain and the side characters and the kind of promise of a sort of interesting arc with the cracks in the universe. And whilst some of Matt Smith's episodes later on would, you know, sort of be, you know, some would be good, some would be a bit hit and miss, he got off to a really good start. And I think that ought to count for something. Number 7, what is your favourite TARDIS desktop theme? Purely because it's the one that I spent the most time with, and because I don't really have a massive attachment to the retro TARDIS desktops, I've got to go with the Eccleston and Tennant era one, which was the first one to really define it as a desktop theme, i.e. the choral theme. Whilst it was implied before that the TARDIS was a living machine, this was the first time where we kind of saw that it had sort of slightly organic components. And I love the fact that the central control column has elements of it that look like they've been salvaged from like a scrapyard or a junk heap. And considering the fact that the first time we see the TARDIS is in a scrapyard, and the idea that parts of it are damaged or broken or obsolete, as well as the idea that post-Time War the Doctor has essentially been sort of cobbling it together out of bits of this and bits of that. It was the one I felt kind of had the most sort of character to it. And finally, number 8, who is your favourite villain or monster? For City of Death has one of my favourite villains from the classic era, Scaroth, played by Julian Glover, and one of the things I love about him is the fact that he is an alien masquerading as a human on Earth, and he has been on Earth for a long time, but he hasn't just been living his life from point A to point B, but his essence is fractured throughout different points in history. So he's essentially the same person living through multiple different time periods. And you get to see him in Renaissance Italy. You get to see him in contemporary Paris. And whilst it's very easy to rag on classic Who for having ropey kind of effects and ropey looking monsters, I just love the fact that when Julian Glover, who plays Scaroth, pulls off his face, it reveals underneath that he is essentially a green seaweed spaghetti monster with one eye and really big eyelashes. It's just a creature design that you couldn't make in modern Who, but that's the point for me. You know, it isn't meant to be this really realistic thing, and it just works. For my favourite new series villain, probably my favourite villain has got to be John Sims' incarnation of the Master. Is really very much the mirror image, the dark doppelganger of the Doctor, in the way he has all these quirky mannerisms, and he's sort of young and kind of slightly kind of charming, but under the surface is this dark, tortured soul who has essentially been driven mad and has kind of become evil, not necessarily for any fault of his own, but through this kind of conspiracy that has sort of worked its way into the fabric of his life retroactively because of the Time Lords. So that's my version of the Doctor Who tag video. Before I go, I want to give a quick honourable mention to An Adventure in Space and Time, directed by Terry McDonough and written by current Doctor Who and Sherlock writer Mark Gatiss. Starred David Bradley as William Hartnell. A great sort of dramatisation of the process of creating Doctor Who, and just the real kind of joy and love and heart that went into creating the show that has lasted 50 years. I also, as a fan of the television show Community, think it would be unfair to go through a Doctor Who tag in which we talk about the things about Doctor Who that we love without mentioning Inspector Spacetime. It only really appears in like a handful of episodes and has like a very limited kind of influence on the show itself, but the fact that it has like this great kind of expanded canon in the show really kind of inspired me. And last year, lacking a better idea for a Halloween costume, I basically decided to go as the anti-version of the Inspector, who is mentioned in the Advanced Gay episode as being essentially the Inspector with a funny mustache and looking kind of rapey. And now comes the laborious task of tagging other people in this video. Basically, if you've watched this video, you are tagged, but I want to name a couple of people specifically. Firstly, I want to tag Jack Tullin and Joseph Lyon. When the 50th anniversary special was coming out, I was originally intending to make a Doctor Who tribute video in which I performed the song Gallifreyan Buccaneer, which is from one of the Big Finish audio plays starring Colin Baker called Doctor Who and the Pirates. It's essentially a version of the Patter song Modern Major General, but with Doctor Who themed lyrics, and I'll include a link to that in the description below. Joe Lyon was supposed to help me edit and put together the finished video, and he did help kind of shoot parts of the video as well, but unfortunately he lost all the footage, so sorry Joe, this is the price you pay. Jack Tullin is one of my fellow students at the University of Lincoln, and he was good enough to lend me one of his sonic screwdrivers for the video. Likewise, he's a big Doctor Who fan and was really kind of generous with his time on this and kind of other projects, and I still kind of feel bad for not giving him back his sonic screwdriver, so sorry Jack. Thanks again to Mickeleh for bringing this to my attention, to Luke Spillane for creating it, and to Barry Aldridge for tagging Mickeleh in the first place. Links to their videos in the description. And in the meantime, Raggedy Adams out.